위로 치신 숨을 줘 Got one shot 누가 날 정했어 Do or die for me Just one 내 안에 나 하나면 돼 It's coming Get ready 머리에 울리는 너의 목소리 지독한 밤이 와 Break out Let's go 해 안목처럼 꿈틀 때 거침없이 도려내
In each of us there are two natures. If this primitive duality of man, good and evil, can be housed in separate identities, life will be relieved of all that is unbearable. It is the curse of mankind that these polar twins should be constantly struggling.
Who has the power to be themselves? Maybe no one. Behind the monochrome masks, lies another color. Behind every masquerade, there is a me. A Hyde, and Jekyll. A Kung-Su. And Baekhyun.
Jekyll's song from EXO, as its name suggests, is in fact inspired from the Gothic novel, The Unusual Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One cold Scottish night, Robert Louis Stevenson had a terrible nightmare, because of the medication he was taking for his illness. In this nightmare, he experienced the transformation of good into evil so clearly, that it caused him to shed tears and shout. Until the poet Griffith Osborne, who was his wife, woke him up from this nightmare. Of course, Stevenson was not very pleased about this because he said angrily, "Why did you wake me? I was dreaming a fine bogey tale." Since this nightmare had been in Stevenson's mind for a long time, he finally decided to write a novel based on this dream, so he could give meaning to his thoughts. Such an idea, which was conceived before writing, will surely be interesting. In fact, his condition plays a role in how Stevenson wrote the novel. While he was very ill and in bed, worked at high speed and did strange things along the way. He has struggled with internal health problems since he was a child. While the rest of his family pursued a family business of lighthouse architecture, he was said to be playing with papers, an irony of writing. This sick individual duality, and yet at the same time being able to produce all this art, is a reflection of the same kind of reality of two identities that governs the atmosphere of the novel. From a nightmare, Stevenson turned himself into the creator of what eventually became one of the most famous novels. According to Stevenson's novel, Dr. Henry Jekyll was a scientist who loved the nature of human duality.
Today I want to talk to you of a greater marvel, the soul of man. My analysis of this soul, the human psyche, leads me to believe that man is not truly one, but truly two. These two carry on an eternal struggle in the nature of man, yet they are chained together. And that chain spells repression to the evil, remorse to the good. Now, if these two selves could be separated from each other, how much freer the good in us would be, what heights it might scale. And the so-called evil, once liberated, would fulfill itself and trouble us no more.
In his own laboratory, Dr. Jekyll spent months experimenting on a potion that could separate humans' wicked self from its good. Eventually he succeeded in achieving such solution, thus he tried it on himself. For the results, he himself splintered in two halves, the good and elegant Dr. Jekyll and the wicked and villainous Edward Hyde. But beyond the mirror and closed eyes, all his bad traits become an independent character. As a result, Dr. Jekyll became two souls in one body.
Can this be evil, then?
At first, Jekyll wanted to strike a balance between the two identities, but gradually he realized that he could get along with people during the day as a kind-hearted doctor, and yet at night, as Mr. Hyde, he could give life to the evils and gloom within himself freely. But time gets tangled up, and Mr. Hyde aspires to become an independent figure, not just a prisoner's wish that Jekyll wants to destroy whenever he wants. Hyde is so powerful that he can take control of Jekyll's body without taking the potion. But alas, to Jekyll's fear, it gets to a point that Hyde commits murder one night. Jekyll blames Mr. Hyde for all this and decides to destroy him. But Hyde reminds him of one thing. You are me and I'm you. In creating Jekyll, Stevenson was inspired by William Brodie, a well-known man from Edinburgh, Scotland, who turned out to be a thief in disbelief. Brodie was a respected cabinet maker in the city, and also owned a copy of the keys to the rich men's house. But it was not long before he gave up his thoughts to his greedy temptations, stealing from the said houses and gambling anonymously at night, betting on cockfighting and deceiving his two mistresses. Stevenson was then inspired by Louis Vivet to create his second character, Hyde. Vivet was the first person to be recognized as a patient of multiple identity disorder. Vivet, who suffered from mental illness as a child, lost the ability to walk, woke up one day while in a psychiatric hospital, and was able to walk again without knowing any of the nurses. And imagined that he was imprisoned there. Hence, doctors realized that it seems that Vivet has become a completely different person. The reason why Hyde was such an important identity is that Hyde is the actual desire that we all hide for different reasons. Mr. Hyde can be a symbol for any secret part of us that has been suppressed or forgotten, whether it is good or bad. The good-hearted Dr. Jekyll and villainous Mr. Hyde actually give us the concept of hide and seek, meaning that these two characters will never see each other until the end of the book, even in the mirror. They only tend to see each other when their worlds become one, and at the same time both souls take control of the body. The same worlds that see two different skies, yet the same skies but with different worlds. Jekyll the EXO song is based on and is in the form of a confrontation. Of course, not a confrontation of two separate people, but a confrontation of two people in a single being. That is why the confrontation between Jekyll and Hyde in the musical of this novel is one of the most difficult confrontations.
All that you are is the end of a nightmare, all that you are is a dying scream. After tonight I shall end this demon's dream. This is not a dream, my friend, and it will never end. This one is the nightmare that goes on. Hide again to stay, no matter what you may pretend, and I'll flourish long after you're gone. Soon you will die and my silence will hide you. You cannot choose but to lose control. You can't control me, I live deep inside you. Each day you feel me devour your soul. I don't need you to survive as you need me. I'll become whole as you dance with death, and I'll rejoice as you breathe your final breath.
Similarly, the members of EXO sometimes sing in Jekyll's perspective, sometimes desperately in Edward Hyde's perspective.
흐린 결말이 엉켜버린 시간이 쌓여가는 의문이 가득해질 때 어긋난 기억 조각을 찾아 헤매여 이 밤 이제 너를 벗어나 왜 날 밀어내 이미 나는 미안해 내 안에 숨겨진 또 다른 내 모습 수면 위로 치신 숨을 재워 Oh my mind 숨길 수 없어 더는 없어 Sing for me 멈춘 시선 길을 잃었어 답은 없어 침묵 속에 나를 가둬 Got one shot 너가 날 향해 또 die for me Just one 내 안에 나면 돼.
What is really appreciable is that it is still difficult to do a single confrontation with mimicry and body acting, but if this difference is to be made only by sound, it will be much more difficult. That's why EXO is so admirable, that you can tell the difference between Hyde and Jekyll by mere listening to their voices. EXO surprised us from the beginning with their great acting, but act voice is not an easy task, so being surprised was one of the thousands of emotions that came to me when I first heard Jekyll. Apart from all this, immersing yourself in the form of a character that exists from the beginning yet we were unaware of them, and we only realize it by returning to the story, is a unique storyline that is owned by thousands of various and beautiful ideas from SM Entertainment and Mr. Lee Suman. Lee Suman is truly a legend who has no fear of performing such thoughts. Jekyll and Hyde's novel is just a drop in the ocean of all the concepts behind EXO, and how masterfully such a design is implemented on EXO that it does not even confuse the thoughts, but gives them coherence. This uncertain ending, the time that got tangled up, is the first sentence from EXO's Jekyll. Just as it is for EXO, there is no ending and no timeline. Time hunts them as prey. They are forced to wander mindlessly in different timelines and places. All these sacrifices to combine the tree of life once again, to protect the world from collapsing. EXO is in the form of Jekyll and EXO is in the form of Edward Hyde. What is very important is the end of the book. At the end of the book there's a confrontation-like obsession music video between Jekyll and Hyde, which ends in a tragedy. Dr. Jekyll shot himself in the lab on July 5, 1886, while being both Mr. Hyde and Jekyll.
What are you going to do? Something so simple. I'm going to put an end to all that confusion.
The story of Jekyll and Hyde is actually the story of EXO and X. When the tree of life split in two, the members of the EXO separated in the same way, but the members of the EXO have no memory of this separation, which is why they do not remember who they are in the Wolf era, except for Luhan, Kreese and Kinsu. EXO and X are not separate, they are inside each other, in two different worlds. EXO is sometimes a savior and sometimes a destroyer. This is why in Exodus path codes, sometimes they have no control over their power or do not know where they are, or why they are there at all. Because the pieces of memories they do not remember, belongs to the second identity of each of them. Finally, in the Obsession music video, we see the world being destroyed, when members symbolically dying. But in the novel, Hyde utters such a magnificent dialogue in confrontation: "If you die, I will live, and I will be you." Did Hyde really die? Which one is the real savior, EXO or EXO? To find out the result, you have to wait for the next music videos, because the answer depends on who destroyed the Tree of Life.